Hello everyone and welcome to this video. So you saw the title, the best video about the Rossolimo. So I know that's a bold claim, but I've reviewed all the videos available and I promise this one is better. And in the end you will agree with me. So what's the Rossolimo? It's in the Sicilian, okay? It's after knight f3, knight c6 and bishop b5. So what's the point with this move? It's a bit like the Ruy Lopez, right? After e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5. So what's the point of the Ruy Lopez? You're attacking this pawn on e5, you're attacking the defender of e5, so at some point you will want to exchange on c6. And I know it doesn't work here, but just to show you the idea, you want to exchange on c6 and then capture on e5. Again, I know it doesn't work tactically here. But if we come back to the Rossolimo, c5, knight f3, bishop b5, here, okay, there is no pawn on e5. So what's the point of attacking this knight, really? Why play bishop b5 at all, right? First idea, you exchange on c6, you inflict double pawns to black. Simple. Also, you play bishop b5, you develop that bishop quickly, and you can castle short immediately, which you cannot do so quickly in many Sicilian lines. Some people will also say that it avoids a lot of complex lines while developing a piece, which is a very good argument as well. But then, what about the bishop pair with black? This is a very important point. Let's say we have g6, you exchange, and here black has the bishop pair. So we know the bishop pair is an important long-term advantage for one side. So what's the point here? White wants to prove that black's double pawns are more important than the bishop pair, which is a very long-term strategy, right? And the point is that with this broken pawn structure here, it makes it harder for black to open lines to try to take advantage of the bishop pair. So this is actually quite a deep idea for white. So again, one example with a basic line that could very well happen: g6 takes d3, and here you have your pawns on the light squares. The remaining bishop is a dark squared bishop, so you have the good bishop remaining. And this is a bit like a Trompowsky, like when you play d4, knight f6, bishop g5, and here immediately with white you exchange in order to play e3, and again you're left with only the good bishop. This is a very similar idea here as well. Now you have to understand that since the Rossolimo is a very strategic line, you've got many possible moves at every point for black and for white as well. But here black has mainly three moves. First move, knowing that white doesn't really want to play necessarily d4 immediately, we can assume that this pawn will remain on c5 for quite a long time. Therefore, this bishop doesn't have a great future on this diagonal, so it makes sense to develop it here in fianchetto and play g6. First move. Second possibility, with knight to f3, bishop b5, white is really going after the control of e5, right? So why not sidestep this plan with black and play something like e6, d5 later on? Good idea, right? So e6 is the second possibility for black at this point. And finally, black often has a hard time to play knight f6 because it's very often immediately met with e5. So similarly to a peer defense, you can play d6 in order to control e5, enabling you later on to play knight f6. So d6 is the third main possibility for black here. And these three moves make a lot of sense. And after any of those moves, white often has the choice between capturing immediately on c6 to ruin the structure, or decide later, castle short, and you go for something really similar to the open Sicilian, but you avoid a lot of sneaky lines that black has in store, like the Sveshnikov, the Roser, the Taimanov, etc. And it doesn't stop it here, actually. After that, white has a lot of possible moves. After castling, there can be rook e1, there can be c3, there can be d3, there can be d4 immediately, and they're all very decent. So what does it mean? It means that you have a lot of possibilities, you have less tactical lines, but at each move you've like three possible options. So I just cannot get through them all, especially since a lot of them look alike with only small differences. So what I can do though is breaking down the big choices and the big decisions you have to take as white or as black, and explain you the decision process. And hopefully when you're in a real game you will be able to find the logic by yourself. Fine for you? So let's dive into that. But first, let's look into a couple of very concrete lines for black. So I said just before that white's idea basically is to inflict double pawns to black, but one question here is, can black avoid the double pawns and play like queen b6? You take on c6, I take with the queen, and so no double pawns. And for that reason, white often doesn't exchange on c6 and play a very good move like knight c3, and the line can go on like that: e6, castle short, knight g to e7, rook e1, and here a6. And this is a very important moment. If you capture here on c6, black will capture back with the knight, which is exactly what black wants to do. So normally you don't exchange on c6 now that the knight is on e7, you retreat to f1. It looks bad, but you will see that a lot in the Rossolimo, so get used to that. Once the rook is on e1, f1 is quite a good square for the bishop. And the point is that you just retreat, you wait for lines to open, and you hope to come out better in this position. But actually the amazing thing is that in this position, exchanging on c6 is very good for white, as the queen is very badly placed on c6. And let me show you that. Takes, takes, and here the queen attacks e4. So you castle short, you don't defend, you castle short. And here taking the pawn here with black is not recommended at all, because look, you play rook e1, you retreat, d4, and here it would probably be better already to play d6, which looks a bit sad, but let's say you play c takes d4, which is a weak move. And after knight takes d4, attacking the queen, things are much worse than they look for black here. Let's imagine that black retreats on c7. Here at this point, try to find a winning move for white. Be careful, this is rather hard. So take a moment, answer the quiz, and I'll catch you later. So we were at this point, and black has just played queen to c7, which is a very big mistake in a difficult position. What is white's best move here? It's knight to b5, and let me show you the idea. If you move away with the queen again, like queen c6, you have knight to d6 check. Beautiful one, because this pawn is pinned by the rook, and black has very little options left. Takes, takes, and here black is completely lost because he cannot capture with the pawn. This is very, very cute, right? So at this point, you probably don't play queen c7 with black, but another move like queen b6. But even here, this is really, really difficult. After some moves like knight c3, knight f6, bishop e3, it's already a +2 for white according to the computer. So very, very difficult position. So probably here, if we come back to the fifth move, after white has castle, black probably doesn't take on e4 here, and plays another move like d6. And again, d4, if black takes on d4, again this queen is very badly placed, and black has a lot of troubles to finish the development. So black should not take on d4 here. And if you're telling me that okay, here you play bishop g4 or knight f6, then okay, fine, then yeah, bishop g4, I play d5, and still with white I have a very good position. So queen b6 here, clever idea, but white captures and white is much better anyway. So now again, before going into the main lines of the Rossolimo, black has another very concrete attempt to play its knight f6. And here I have to say that with white you can capture on c6, inflict double pawns, but this is really transposing to some other lines we will see later, so I won't speak about this. I will really speak about the specifics of knight to f6, and the most principal way to tackle that with white is knight c3, okay? And now black has the very strange looking knight d4 here, which is attacking your bishop. And what do you do with white here? If you have never seen this move, it might not be easy to find the right way to react to that. First of all, you don't take on d4, because if you take, then black takes back, then you move this knight, and black will capture the pawn. So one pawn down with white on move 5 or 6, that's not a very good opening. So you don't take. What you have to understand here is that with white, you should not be able to give up that bishop on b5. And with that in mind, you can play e5. And you're not afraid about knight takes b5 because, well, after all, it took a lot of time for black to get to this, right? So you take, and knight to d5 with black, the best one. And here, let me tell you, castling short is okay. c4 is okay, but the funniest one is knight to g5 by far, and it's totally correct. And here I've got another question for you. So let's imagine black plays g6, which is a mistake, as you will soon understand. What is your move with white? I'll let you think about it, and I'll catch you later. If black plays g6, what's the right move? And I'm gonna give you an honorable mention if you played knight takes f7, which is acceptable, but playing it with queen to f3 with the same idea is actually better. And you'll see it give you an advantage. It's a double attack, basically, on d5 and f7, but it's not that simple because black can play f6. Did you see that? Takes on d5, takes on c5, and yeah, okay, white is much better, all right? So it means that after knight g5, which is sort of a main line actually, black should play like f5 or f6, after which white plays knight e4 or queen f3. You see, there are a lot of possible lines, a lot of branches. So if you want to go deep into that, you can. And the line can go like this, like takes on d5, and okay, this is kind of a messy position. If you've prepared that, you probably already have an advantage. But let's come back a few moves. Here, black actually has an improved way to play this knight d4 idea. The idea in itself is really good, but you've got a better way to play this, arguably. It's to play queen to c7 first in order to control the square e5. Why is it important? Let's say that. Castling short, and here after knight d4, white cannot play e5. I almost made it into a quiz, but I'm gonna explain immediately why here it's not good. But you can pause the video if you want to find by yourself. It's not so hard. It's takes on f3, takes, and after queen takes e5, of course black is one pawn up, so here white cannot definitely play e5. So white has to play differently, like rook e1 for instance, and here if you take on b5 with black, it's not very good because it gives a free tempo on the queen. It can get really bad for black. Just a funny line as an illustration: queen d8, and here e5, knight to d5, and here the fun part is knight to d6, check, takes, and here you see it's not gonna go very well for black. Just to mention that black has to put something here that is going to be captured either by the pawn or the rook, and white is doing much better here, clearly. So if we come back a few moves, black doesn't capture on b5 and plays something like a6 instead, and here you're gonna play a bishop to f1, and after which you have either with black e5 or the funny knight to g4, and be careful here because there is this checkmate threat on h2, so you should not remove that knight with white, but in the end it's gonna be just fine. Black is probably going to reposition the knight on e5, and it's gonna be a good game for both sides. So as a recap, in those knight f6 lines, black is doing fine. It's much better than the queen b6 line, but now we are going into the real stuff. Not knight f6, but either d6, e6, or g6. So let's focus on the big choices for both colors, starting with taking on c6 or castling short. So that's really two different words, and that's the biggest question for white. So let's say that white takes, and we are going to study all the lines with d6, e6, and g6 where white takes first, and then we're gonna see the lines where white castles. Now, if white captures, how do you take back with black? It's not so obvious actually after g6, because there are upsides and downsides for the two options. Black can take here, which is the natural option, because it reinforces the center. Yeah, pawns go towards the center. They can support a later d5 push, so it looks like the most principled continuation, but it kind of locks your pieces. For instance, this bishop here doesn't have a great future, and if you play it to a6, which looks like a wonderful square, then just a move like d3 completely locks it down. Okay, so my point is just to say it's not so obvious that b takes c6 is the best move. After g6, it's a matter of taste, really. But after a move like e6, this is my question for you. White takes, and now with black, do you take back with the b pawn or the d pawn? Take a moment. This is not a tactical question, it's more a strategic question. You have to think about generic principles and find the best move. So think a moment, and I'll see you later. So that's the conclusion on the part 1 of the best video about the Rossolimo. If you want to see more, go check my website and you'll see there is a lot more content. I'll see you there.